Family and fans try to process his sudden loss. Those who grew up beside him say that he was bigger than just music.
I want to give a T.I.P. Thug in Peace to Lil Poppa, man.
When the streets went silent and social media froze, one name everyone was waiting to hear from was Yo Gotti. For days, there was nothing. No posts, no interviews, no statements. Fans started asking questions. Why the silence? What was really going on behind the scenes? And then, out of nowhere, he finally spoke. The loss surrounding Lil Poppa hit hard. Not just for the fans, but for the industry. Rumors were flying. Speculation was everywhere. Some said there was tension. Others claimed there was more to the story than what the public knew. But when Gotti broke his silence, nobody expected the emotion in his voice. This wasn't just a casual response. It felt personal, raw, unfiltered. The kind of statement that makes you stop scrolling and really listen. Fans were stunned, not just because he spoke, but because of how he spoke. The tone, the timing, the message. Was this a moment of unity? A hidden message? Or something deeper the industry doesn't want to address? Tonight, we're breaking down exactly what was said, what it means, and why fans believe this changes everything. Stay locked in, because what you're about to hear might completely shift how you see this situation. When Yo Gotti finally addressed the situation surrounding Lil Poppa, the energy changed instantly. This wasn't just another industry statement crafted by a PR team. This felt different. The timing alone had people raising eyebrows. For days, fans had been tagging Gotti, flooding comment sections, demanding answers. Some questioned his silence. Others defended him, saying grief doesn't always need to be public. But when he finally spoke, it wasn't just words, it was the weight behind them that caught everyone off guard. He didn't come with aggression. He didn't come with excuses. Instead, he came with reflection. Gotti talked about loyalty, about pain, and about how losses in the industry hit differently when you've built real bonds behind closed doors. And that's what made fans pause. Because this wasn't framed as business. It was framed as brotherhood. What stood out the most was the tone. His voice carried something heavy, not anger, not fear, but disappointment mixed with reality. He acknowledged how fast narratives spread online, how people create stories before facts are clear. Without directly calling anyone out, he made it clear that not everything being said reflects the truth. And that's where things get interesting. Because the hip-hop industry has always operated on layers. What's public is rarely the full story. Behind the scenes, relationships are complicated. Deals, pressures, street ties, expectations, it's never just music. So when Gotti mentioned how outsiders don't understand what really goes on, fans immediately started dissecting every word. Was he hinting at internal tension? Was he responding to rumors indirectly? Or was he simply expressing frustration with how quickly people judge? The internet did what it always does, it split into sides. One group praised him for finally speaking up. They felt his words showed maturity and leadership. As someone who's built an empire and guided multiple artists, they believe he handled it the only way a veteran could: calm, calculated, and respectful. Another group wasn't convinced. They felt the statement left too many questions unanswered. They wanted clarity, direct answers, specific details. In today's social media era, subtlety often gets mistaken for avoidance. And that's where the controversy grew. But here's something most people aren't talking about. Loss in the rap industry isn't just emotional, it's political. Every statement can shift alliances. Every word can be interpreted as loyalty or distance. When a major figure like Gotti speaks, it carries weight beyond feelings. It affects business relationships, public perception, and even safety. And that's why the pause before he spoke might have been intentional. Think about it. In moments like this, timing is everything. Speak too soon and you risk saying something incomplete. Speak too late and people accuse you of indifference. Gotti walked that fine line carefully. He emphasized unity. He emphasized staying solid. But he also emphasized learning from pain. That part stood out, because it sounded less like a reaction and more like a message to the next generation watching. Fans noticed how he avoided fueling negativity. No blame. No sneak disses. No emotional outbursts. That restraint alone says a lot about where he stands mentally. It suggests growth, or at the very least, awareness of the bigger picture. Still, questions remain. What exactly happened behind the scenes? How close were Gotti and Poppa at this stage? Were there tensions the public never saw? Those answers may never fully surface. And maybe that's the point. Not everything needs to be consumed by the internet. What we do know is this: when someone of Gotti's stature chooses to speak, it's deliberate. He's navigated controversy before. He understands optics. He understands narrative control. So whatever he said was measured. But fans weren't just reacting to the words. They were reacting to the silence before them. Silence creates imagination. And imagination online can spiral quickly. That's why his eventual statement hit harder than it might have otherwise. It closed one chapter of speculation, but opened another layer of discussion. Some insiders believe this moment could reshape how artists within his circle move going forward. Situations like this force reflection. They force tighter security, tighter communication, stronger bonds, or sometimes quiet distance. And here's the deeper angle. Hip-hop has always struggled with loss. From rising talents to established veterans, the pattern is painful and repetitive. Every time it happens, there's outrage, there's grief, there's calls for change. And then, slowly, the cycle repeats. Gotti's message, whether intentional or not, felt like a recognition of that cycle. A subtle acknowledgement that something has to shift. Was it a warning? Was it regret? Was it simply mourning? Maybe it was all three. What's undeniable is that fans felt it. The comment sections weren't filled with jokes or trolling. They were filled with emotion, shock, reflection, even appreciation for honesty. And that tells you something. Because in an era where drama spreads faster than facts, a composed, emotionally grounded response can feel shocking on its own. This situation isn't just about one statement. It's about perception, about leadership, about how influential figures respond when the spotlight gets heavy. And as this story continues to unfold, one thing is certain: people will keep analyzing every move, every interview, every post, every interaction. Part 1 sets the tone. But there's more beneath the surface. Because sometimes what's said publicly is only half the story, and what remains unsaid is where the real truth lives. Because sometimes what's said publicly is only half the story, and what remains unsaid is where the real truth lives. And that's exactly where this situation begins to get deeper. When Yo Gotti chose his words carefully, many people focused on what he did say. But the real conversation started around what he didn't say. There were no detailed explanations, no timelines, no breakdown of events. Just emotion, reflection, and subtle messaging. For some, that was powerful. For others, it felt incomplete. But here's the reality: in the music industry, especially at a high level, silence can be a strategy. Gotti has spent years building more than just a rap career. He's built business ventures, partnerships, and a reputation as someone who understands how to move strategically. So when something heavy happens around someone like Lil Poppa, every public move matters. One wrong sentence can spark tension. One emotional reaction can create headlines for weeks. That's why his calm delivery stood out. He spoke about pain in a way that felt personal but controlled. He didn't allow the narrative to spiral into chaos. Instead, he subtly shifted the focus toward growth, accountability, and awareness. That's leadership, at least from one perspective. But not everyone sees it that way. Some critics argue that leadership also requires transparency. They believe fans deserve clarity, especially when rumors are circulating at full speed. In today's digital age, information spreads instantly. TikTok clips, reposted tweets, reaction videos, speculation becomes truth in a matter of hours. And when there's no immediate clarification, assumptions fill the gap. That gap created tension online. People began revisiting old interviews, old photos, old collaborations. They analyzed body language from past events. They questioned business ties. The internet turned into a courtroom of opinions. And that's when this situation evolved beyond just a statement. It became a cultural discussion. Because this isn't only about two artists. It's about how hip-hop processes loss. It's about how power dynamics work behind the scenes. It's about loyalty versus optics. And it's about whether public figures owe the audience full access to their emotions and private realities. Gotti's response seemed to suggest one thing clearly: not everything is for public consumption. And that mindset clashes directly with modern social media culture, where audiences expect constant access. But let's zoom out for a second. Throughout his career, Gotti has experienced different waves of controversy, success, and transition. He's seen artists rise and fall. He's navigated industry politics. That experience likely shapes how he reacts now. Emotional reactions may satisfy headlines, but strategic restraint protects long-term positioning. That's not cold. That's calculated. Still, emotion was there. You could hear it in the pauses. The tone shifts. In the subtle weight behind certain phrases. He spoke about how quickly people judge situations they're not part of. He hinted at how heavy leadership can feel when responsibility extends beyond yourself. And that may have been the most revealing part. Because leadership in hip-hop isn't just about chart positions. It's about influence. When something tragic happens within your circle, people expect you to set the tone. If you react aggressively, that energy spreads. If you react calmly, that energy spreads too. So what tone was he really setting? Some fans believe he was encouraging unity, reminding younger artists to move smarter, think bigger, and avoid cycles that have hurt the culture for decades. Others think he was protecting something deeper: business interests, alliances, or unresolved internal matters. Both interpretations might hold pieces of truth. The hip-hop industry has always been layered. Relationships are rarely black and white. An artist can be family one moment and business the next. There are contracts involved, expectations involved, street reputations involved. When loss intersects with all of that, the emotional impact becomes complicated. That complexity is what makes this story heavier than headlines suggest. Another angle to consider is how grief works differently for everyone. Not everyone mourns loudly. Not everyone posts paragraphs on Instagram. Some process internally. Some speak only when they've gathered their thoughts. The pressure of public grief can distort authentic emotion. Gotti might have been navigating that pressure in real time. And then there's the generational gap. Younger fans often demand instant transparency. Older industry figures often prioritize privacy and control. That clash creates misunderstanding. What feels too quiet to one generation feels respectful to another. Meanwhile, the industry keeps moving. New music drops. New controversies emerge. Attention shifts. But moments like this linger beneath the surface. They influence decisions. They reshape trust. They alter how artists communicate going forward. Insiders speculate that circles may tighten after situations like this. Security increases. Conversations become more private. Moves become more deliberate. Not out of paranoia, but out of awareness. And awareness changes behavior. It's also important to recognize how public narratives can unfairly box people in. If Gotti had reacted with visible anger, headlines might accuse him of escalating tension. If he remained completely silent, he'd be accused of indifference. There's rarely a perfect response when emotions are high. So maybe the real takeaway isn't about what he said, but about the impossible position leaders often find themselves in. In a culture where every word becomes content, authenticity becomes risky. And yet, fans still crave it. That's why this moment feels significant. It forces the culture to ask bigger questions. Do artists owe us explanations for every internal situation? Is public grief performative or necessary? How do we balance accountability with privacy? These aren't simple questions, but they matter. As conversations continue, one thing is clear: this wasn't just another trending topic. It tapped into something deeper within hip-hop's ongoing struggle with loss, loyalty, and leadership. And while the headlines may fade, the impact of this moment could quietly shape how future situations are handled. Because in an era driven by reaction, sometimes the most powerful move is restraint. And whether you agree with his approach or not, Yo Gotti made one thing certain: he's fully aware that every word carries weight. The story isn't over. Conversations are still unfolding. Interpretations are still evolving. But one truth remains. In hip-hop, silence can speak just as loudly as words. But one truth remains. In hip-hop, silence can speak just as loudly as words. And that silence, especially from someone like Yo Gotti, doesn't happen without purpose. As the dust begins to settle, the deeper impact of his statement is starting to reveal itself. This wasn't just about addressing the loss connected to Lil Poppa. It was about positioning, about legacy, about how moments of crisis shape reputations in ways success never could. Because here's something most people overlook: adversity defines leadership more than victory does. Anyone can celebrate wins publicly. But how do you respond when tragedy hits your circle? That's what people remember. In the days following his statement, something subtle shifted in the online conversation. The initial shock turned into reflection. Reaction channels slowed down. Instead of fiery debates, more thoughtful discussions started emerging. People weren't just asking, "Why did he wait?" anymore. They were asking, "What does this mean for the culture?" And that question is bigger than one situation. The hip-hop industry has long carried the weight of loss. Promising careers cut short. Internal conflicts that escalate too far. Misinformation spreads faster than facts. Every few months, it feels like the culture is forced to mourn again. So when a veteran like Gotti speaks in a tone centered around awareness and responsibility, it lands differently. He didn't just talk about grief, he talked about perspective. He hinted at lessons, at moving smarter, at thinking long-term. And whether intentional or not, that sounded like a message aimed beyond just one artist or one event. It sounded generational. And that's where part 3 of this story really begins. Because if you listen closely, his words weren't just reactive, they were preventative. Almost like he was trying to break a cycle without directly naming it. That's a delicate move. Calling out systemic issues in hip-hop can create backlash. But suggesting growth without assigning blame? That opens space for change. Still, not everyone is satisfied. There are fans who believe silence before the statement caused unnecessary speculation. They argue that in today's hyper-connected world, waiting allows narratives to spiral out of control. And they're not wrong. The vacuum of information always gets filled, usually with theories. But here's the flip side. Immediate reactions can lock you into statements you later regret. In emotionally charged situations, words spoken too quickly can escalate tension. Gotti's measured timing suggests calculation, not avoidance. And calculation is often misunderstood as coldness. Yet if you examine his career trajectory, it's clear he operates with long-term vision. From building business ventures to mentoring artists, he's shown an understanding that moves ripple outward. That mindset doesn't disappear during a crisis. So perhaps his approach wasn't about dodging questions, but about controlling impact. Another layer to consider is internal accountability. When something heavy happens within your extended circle, there are conversations that occur privately before anything is said publicly. Legal considerations, family considerations, emotional processing. Not everything can or should be broadcast instantly. And that reality clashes with modern fan culture, where audiences expect immediate transparency. But transparency and timing are not the same thing. By the time Gotti spoke, he seemed grounded, centered, not reactive. That composure might signal internal clarity, or it might signal discipline. Either way, it sent a message: chaos will not dictate the tone. That message alone may influence younger artists watching closely. Because beyond charts and streams, artists observe how veterans handle storms. They learn from those moments. They adjust their own approach accordingly. If anything, this situation might reinforce a new era of strategic communication within hip-hop, one less driven by impulse and more by intention. But here's the uncomfortable truth. No statement will ever satisfy everyone. Some fans want emotion. Others want information. Others want drama. When a public figure chooses restraint, it can feel anticlimactic in a culture fueled by viral reactions. And yet, the absence of drama might be the loudest statement of all. By not escalating, not blaming, not fueling rumor cycles, Gotti essentially denied controversy oxygen. And in today's algorithm-driven world, that's powerful. Think about how many situations explode simply because someone adds fuel. One live rant, one heated tweet, one vague accusation. Suddenly, weeks of headlines follow. That didn't happen here. Instead, what we saw was a controlled narrative. Not defensive, not dismissive, just deliberate. And deliberate leadership can be unsettling because it doesn't offer easy answers. It forces people to sit with uncertainty. As this story continues to evolve, the long-term effect may be less about what was said and more about what was modeled. A blueprint for navigating crises without self-destruction. A reminder that composure is strength. Of course, only time will tell how relationships behind the scenes adjust. Situations like this often reshape trust networks quietly. Conversations may happen that the public never hears. Alliances may tighten. Boundaries may shift. But publicly, the tone has been set. And tone shapes culture. If younger artists internalize the message of reflection over reaction, that alone could shift future outcomes. Not overnight, not perfectly, but gradually. The hip-hop community has always balanced intensity with artistry, passion with pride. But maturity? That's something the culture continues to grow into. Moments like this accelerate that growth. As fans, it's easy to demand clarity, but it's harder to acknowledge complexity. The music industry isn't just entertainment, it's business, relationships, history, and personal emotion intertwined. And when loss enters that equation, simplicity disappears. What Gotti's response ultimately highlights is this: leadership in hip-hop is evolving. It's no longer just about dominance or visibility. It's about steadiness, about understanding when to speak and how. Whether you believe he said enough or not enough, one fact remains undeniable: he didn't allow chaos to define the narrative. And in a culture where chaos often trends fastest, that choice stands out. So as conversations continue and new headlines inevitably emerge, remember this moment. Not for controversy, not for speculation, but for the subtle shift it represents. Because sometimes the most powerful transformation doesn't arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives quietly, measured, intentional, and aware. And in this case, that quiet may echo longer than any viral reaction ever could. If you made it this far, that means you really care about what's happening in the culture right now. And that's exactly why your voice matters. The situation involving Yo Gotti and the emotional moments surrounding Lil Poppa isn't just another headline. It's part of a bigger conversation about leadership, loyalty, and how hip-hop handles loss. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think Gotti handled this the right way? Should he have spoken sooner? Or was his calm, calculated response exactly what the culture needed? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now, but keep it respectful. Real discussions build real understanding. And if you appreciate deep breakdowns like this, not just gossip, not just surface-level reactions, make sure you hit that like button. It helps this video reach more people who actually care about real conversations in hip-hop. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications because this story is still developing and there's more angles we haven't even touched yet. Share this video with someone who follows the culture closely. Let's keep the conversation going the right way. This isn't just content. This is about understanding the bigger picture. Stay locked in.